Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today, let's talk about history. I'm going to talk about a historical period in which a distinctive style in literature and art was produced. I'm going to tell you stories about the Mona Lisa and the statue of David. I'm also going to tell you why I recommend Italy as your next vacation destination. Before I go any further, can you guess what I'm talking about? Yes, you guessed it right. Today's video is about the Renaissance. Here in America, this word is usually pronounced as Renaissance. Even though I've lived in America for over 20 years, I still speak English the way I learned a long time ago, which was more like British English. As it is such a big topic, I have to make two videos. Today's video is the first episode. In this episode, I will first give you a very brief introduction of the Renaissance. Then I will explain why Italy, and especially Florence, was the birthplace of the Renaissance. And finally, I will talk about humanism as the heart of the Renaissance. In the next episode, I will focus on literature and art, talking about those great figures such as Dante, Da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo. As a conclusion, I will discuss the impact of the Renaissance on European history. By the way, this video series is based on my published book, which is entitled Essentials of World History, the third edition, which is available on Amazon. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. In European history, the Renaissance refers to a time period from the 14th century to the 17th century. It marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of a new era. By the way, the Middle Ages refers to the time period in European history from the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century until the 14th century. During the Middle Ages, Europeans suffered a great deal from natural disasters, economic decline, and political chaos. That's why the Middle Ages is also known as the Dark Ages. Beginning from the mid-14th century, however, Europe witnessed a time of economic recovery. Agriculture improved, population increased, cities grew, and long-distance trade revived. Europeans saw themselves living better lives and enjoying more material possessions. We all know that in human history, a time of economic prosperity was always accompanied by prosperity in culture, and it was no exception at this time. Material wealth gave rise to a major cultural movement which became known as the Renaissance. Historically speaking, the Renaissance served as a transition from the classical to the modern world in European history. The birthplace of the Renaissance was Italy, which by this time had become largely an urban society thanks to this strategic position in the network of world trade. Some major cities such as Florence, Venice, and Rome had become the centers of Italian political, economic, and social life. As these cities accumulated more and more wealth, a secular spirit and a secular thinking emerged, which emphasized the enjoyment of the current worldly things as opposed to the religious belief in the afterlife. Against this background, significant achievements were made in literature, art, philosophy, and political and historical thought. Eventually, with the introduction of the printing press, which had been imported from China through the Arabs in the mid-15th century, the new cultural trends spread from Italy to other parts of Europe and produced many distinctive, outstanding figures. To a large extent, the Renaissance laid the foundation for another movement, which became known as the Protestant Reformation, which completely changed the medieval way of life in Western Europe and ushered in the modern age in Europe. The term Renaissance, which was first used by a French historian in the 1860s, is initially a French word, meaning rebirth. Nowadays, when we talk about the Renaissance, we are referring to a unique cultural and intellectual movement which revived the values and artistic styles of classical antiquity. When I say classical antiquity, I'm referring to the world of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Many intellectuals who were active in this movement believed that they had rediscovered the superiority of the Greek and Roman culture after a long time of cultural decline in the Middle Ages. Today, most scholars and professors of history, myself included, agree that there is a distinctive Renaissance style in music, literature, and the arts. As a history professor who is also interested in art, I always spend quite a lot of time talking about the Renaissance every semester. However, I have to say from my personal experience that books or lectures cannot do justice to the beauty and creativity of the Renaissance. If you want to see a complete and vivid picture, you should pay a visit to Italy and see it all with your own eyes. I can assure you, it is amazing. What I saw in Italy, especially in the city of Florence, was more than I had expected as a history professor. The unique and distinctive Italian Renaissance style in architecture, painting, and sculpture was far beyond what I could describe to my students. Now, let me explain why Italy is the best place to experience the spirit and beauty of the Renaissance. The reason is simple. It was the birthplace of the Renaissance, and it still lives on today. Unlike England and France, where London and Paris dominated other cities, Italy did not have a dominant capital city. A number of cities grew side by side, including Milan, Rome, Florence, and Venice. For a number of reasons, these cities became ideal places for the culture of the Renaissance to emerge and develop. First, the Italian peninsula had been the birthplace and center of the Roman Empire. Throughout Italy, much of the Roman artistic and architectural heritage still remained intact. The remnants of monuments and ruins of buildings were still visible. Furthermore, the continued use of Latin by the educated people kept memories of the great classical civilization alive in many Italian cities. In such an environment, city dwellers were naturally more interested in reviving their own cultural heritage. Secondly, as the center of the Mediterranean basin, Italy had profited from trade and from both Islamic and Byzantine cultural influences. As a result, Italian cities were far more economically vibrant than the rest of Western Europe, with merchants carrying Italian commodities to every part of the continent. As I said earlier, material wealth has always been the basis for cultural development. Rich Italian merchants became important patrons of the arts. More importantly, those rich merchants were secular in thinking, and they insisted that their clients develop more secular art forms rather than totally religious styles. Finally, Italian cities were less feudal than those in northern Europe, thanks to their open geographical locations. The affluent and well-educated urban dwellers were more open-minded, therefore more willing to try various artistic and literary expressions. The ancient world of Greece and Rome, with their urbanized and sophisticated cultures, was exactly what they were looking for. The Renaissance was marked by a strong interest in the tangible and secular world, and the intellectuals of the Renaissance believed in the knowledge that was obtained through experience. The Renaissance people turned away from the religious speculations about afterlife and began to focus on their own lives right here and right now. The spirit of the movement can be summarized in one word: humanism. There were a couple of reasons. First, the Renaissance was a movement based upon the study of the classics of ancient Greece and Rome. Intellectuals studied books on grammar, rhetoric, poetry, philosophy, and history written by the ancient Greek and Roman authors. These subjects are collectively known as the humanities, hence humanism. Secondly, the Renaissance brought about a secular view of life. In the Middle Ages, humans had been considered as sinful, but now the idea that individual humans had beauty, worth, virtue, and dignity began to take hold. More and more people came to enjoy worldly pleasures. For the Renaissance intellectuals, God played a less sensual, less intimidating role in human life. What was happening here and now became more interesting than the unpredictable afterlife. These changes in values were due to several factors. Number one, the growth and prosperity of cities provided entertainment to its residents, who felt tempted and encouraged to seek worldly pleasures. Number two, the expansion of trade and the growth of prosperity and luxury gave people opportunities and means to enjoy themselves here and now. And number three, as trade further developed, social contacts among people became more frequent. It generated a strong interest in knowing one another. Well, that is all that I wanted to talk about today. In the next episode, I will be talking about the literary and artistic achievements of the Renaissance, focusing on those great figures such as Da Vinci and Michelangelo. I will also be telling you stories about the very famous painting of Mona Lisa and the statue of David. Please subscribe to this channel and stay tuned. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.